Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Barnard here, Overtime Athletes. So for today's video, I wanted to make essentially coaching the 40-yard dash, okay? Recently had some guys in here that were preparing for a pro day, and I figured I'd kind of just share the insights as to how I approach somebody. This could go also for 60-yard dash for a baseball player preparing for that. It can go for pro shuttle. Most of this is just kind of the back end of it, of how I'm looking to essentially increase that particular athlete's speed or decrease their time in as little amount of time as possible. Now, if you're working with a track athlete that has like a full off season, you might approach it different. But as you know, with the pro day, usually with the 40-yard dash or combine, you only have a select period of time, anywhere from 4 to as little as maybe a couple weeks to prepare for this. So in order of most important to least important, I'll share with you guys kind of the mindset and what we're trying to attack each time that we get into the training. So the first one that we want to set them up on is, no surprise, is their actual stance, right? Are we setting them up in the best, most efficient mechanical advantage to be able to support that horizontal velocity, being able to apply as much horizontal force possible coming out into that acceleration phase? A lot of athletes typically just don't realize the importance of the shin angles, the importance of where the back heel is, and being able to set themselves up to spring forward. And that just starts purely with the stance. And let me just mention this: the 10 yards is the most biggest focal point of your training when you're preparing and you only have a limited amount of time. The second one is the actual start. This is actually your first initial movements coming out, right? So now that we've put you in the best mechanical advantage as far as the stance goes, now we want to utilize the power. A lot of athletes that I typically notice, they're only generating force off that lead leg, that power leg, which is typically for right-handers, the left leg; for left-handers, the right leg. And they typically only drive off of that single leg. But what we want to be able to do is we want them to be able to activate that back leg, right? And what I like to tell my guys is, imagine if you're taking a broad jump. If you were to jump with 2 feet, or if you were to jump with 1 foot, what would you go further on? And obviously this is 2 feet. So why, when we're jumping out of our 40 stance, are we not activating that back leg? So I really teach them to be able to activate that back glute and bang that back heel as the cue I use for them to be able to essentially drive off both legs out. The next is their steps. Now, most people think like you're trying to cure somebody with their cycling right off bat, and you just want, the acceleration is associated with not cycling as far as in the maximum speed or maximum velocity, and we're really trying to almost shuffle our legs and apply that force back down into the ground, so that we create the most efficient leg pattern for them to accelerate forward. Well, when it comes to steps, it's actually the third on the rung, because ideally, if you don't have them set up in the right stance and they're not power off in the start, then we can't get them into the correct steps. Or we can, but like I said, this is the most bang for your buck as far as decreasing the amount of time. Now, when it comes to steps, the biggest thing that we want to be able to teach is obviously for that back heel not to cycle during the residual phase. And we want them to be able to stay as close to the ground as they can, so that each step is applying more force back into the ground without looping it up. A common cue that I've noticed is starting to, with my athletes, that's starting to help is I almost tell them, think like you're ice skating or rollerblading, right? You're not really picking your feet up. You're driving that knee forward and pushing it back down into the ground. So it's just a simple way that I like to teach them to be able to do it. There's a lot more cues and there's a lot more associated when it comes to the steps. But like I said, it's a matter of the third focal point that we actually focus on. The next fourth is when we're going to go after 10 yards. So what I like to tell my athletes, the reason why we focus so much on 10 yards is because that's the biggest bang for your buck. That's the most change we can see in a limited amount of time. And then whatever you get on your 10 is typically 2.8 to 3.2 on the last 30, that back end. And a lot of those changes during your maximum velocity, your top speed mechanics, are associated with front side mechanics and backside mechanics. But the reason why I say this, or the reason why it's placed fourth on this list, is because incremental changes to this need to be, changes to your front side and backside mechanics typically need to be incremental and over time, or else you can really change things with that athlete, so you get them thinking too much and then they kind of lose sight of being natural when they run. A big focus on max velocity is performing a series of circuits that isolate certain components and elevate them. A majority of the time what I spend with these guys with max velocity and top speed training is really maintaining that dorsiflexion so we can triple flex during that residual phase quickly, front side mechanics so they get the knee high enough, and just simple things that they can essentially start to grasp and incrementally change over time. Finally, when it comes to on the totem pole of this, of teaching the 40-yard dash, it will be the transition phase. Transition phase is obviously from acceleration to maximum velocity. And really the thing that I mostly focus on when it comes to transition is the eyes. I noticed that from the neck, most guys are either tucked here and their spine isn't neutral, or they're overextended, which raises the torso up. So really in this phase, what I'm teaching them is how to be able to transition their eyes to slowly raise and keep their spine neutral and their head neutral with their spine. So that they naturally raise their eyes during that race. If they leave it down and their chin tucked too long, that can make them try to promote acceleration. Or if they pop their neck and extend it too fast, that essentially moves them into top speed a little bit too quick. So again, I just wanted to spit from a coaching level, or if you're an athlete who wants to start trying to get better at the 40-yard dash, how you should approach your training and what gets you the most bang for your buck. Now, it's not to say I don't work on all 5 of these simultaneously, but if you're looking at 1 through 5 from placing amount of emphasis, I don't really start to place emphasis on the steps unless we get the stance down. I don't really place emphasis on transition unless we have the stance down. And of course, there's finer details of everything, like when to take a breath, how to irradiate power through your body, where there's a lot more detail when it comes to that, but here's the level of emphasis that I place when teaching. I hope this helps. Sorry for the rant. I'll catch you guys next time.